In the quiet, mist-shrouded village of Nokura, nestled deep in the green folds of the Kirin Mountains, lived a boy named Baka. The village was peaceful, known for its blooming sakura trees and its sacred spring, but it bore a long-forgotten history, once a land of warriors, now a haven of farmers. Baka, orphaned at a young age, was raised by an old blacksmith named Tomo, who had once wielded a blade in the service of kings. Tomo was stern but kind, and he taught Baka not only to forge steel but also to respect it. Though Baka helped around the forge during the day, every evening he begged Tomo to train him with the sword. At first, Tomo refused. "The sword brings more grief than glory," he would say, but Baka was persistent. He trained alone in the woods, swinging a wooden branch until his hands blistered and his arms trembled. One day, Tomo found him collapsed under a cedar tree, soaked with sweat, but still gripping his makeshift blade. From that day on, Tomo relented. Training began before dawn. Tomo taught Baka the old ways, stances, footwork, the art of reading an opponent. He learned not just how to swing a sword, but how to breathe with it. Every swing had a purpose, every movement a meaning. And Baka was a quick learner. Too quick, some whispered. By 16, Baka was faster than Tomo, and strong. His spirit was unbreakable, yet his heart was still soft. He would spar with the village children, then help elders carry water. Despite his growing prowess, he remained humble. But peace never lingers forever. One day, smoke rose on the eastern horizon. Bandits, the Red Fong clan, descended on the outer farms, burning crops and demanding tribute. The village elders, frightened and long untrained in war, turned to Tomo. But Tomo was old, and his sword days were past. "I am not the sword of this village anymore," he said, placing his hand on Baka's shoulder. "He is." Baka stood before the council that night, his forged steel blade, the first he ever made, strapped to his back. "I will protect Nokura," he said, voice steady. "Not because I am the strongest, but because I love it most." And so, Baka the warrior took his first step toward legend, not as a hero seeking fame, but as a boy with a sword, defending the only home he'd ever known. In a remote village surrounded by forest and fog, lived a quiet boy named Baka. He wasn't like the others. He was born with a strange mark on his hand, and a sword no one could lift but him. The villagers whispered that it was cursed, or perhaps blessed. But to Baka, it was simply part of who he was. Though he helped with farming and gathering herbs, Baka dreamed of going to the city to study. He didn't want to fight or frighten anyone. He just wanted to learn how to read old scrolls, discover the truth behind his sword, and maybe one day use it to protect, not scare. One morning, his grandmother gave him a bundle of dried fish and rice, and told him, "Go. The sword chose you for a reason, but let your heart lead, not the blade." When Baka entered the city, heads turned. The long black sword strapped to his back shimmered with an eerie light. People stepped aside in fear. Some guards followed him from a distance. Children hid behind their mothers. "Why bring that here?" growled a merchant. "He must be troubled," whispered a passerby. "I heard he can summon storms," said another. Baka said nothing. He simply walked to the school gates and asked to enroll. The headmaster frowned. "We don't allow weapons here." "I only carry it. I don't use it unless I must," Baka said, gently placing the sword on the ground. "Please, I came to learn, not to fight." Reluctantly, they let him in. Students avoided him at first. No one sat next to him in class. But Baka listened carefully, helped others with their chores, and never lost his temper, even when mocked. One day, a shadow beast slipped through the city walls. Screams echoed as people fled the streets. The city guard was overwhelmed. Baka heard the roar and ran toward it. He unsheathed his sword for the first time. The blade gleamed not with darkness, but with light. With swift, graceful movements, Baka fought the beast back into the shadows. When it was gone, the city was silent. Then, cheers erupted. The same people who once feared him now bowed in thanks. From that day on, Baka was known not as a monster or a threat, but as the scholar with a sword. He continued his studies and later taught others, reminding them that appearances can deceive, but actions reveal truth. And though he still carried the sword, it was clear Baka's true strength came from his heart. The city was quieter now. People no longer stared at Baka with suspicion when he walked by. They nodded, even smiled. After saving them from the shadow beast, he had earned their respect. But today was different. For the first time since he could walk, Baka left his sword at home. He stood in front of the school gates, feeling strangely light and a little exposed. Without the weight of the blade on his back, he felt like something was missing, not just protection, but a part of who he was. "Are you really Baka?" one student teased as he walked past. "Where's the famous sword?" another said, half joking. Baka gave a quiet smile. "It's resting. Today, I want to see who I am without it." Inside class, he sat with the others. For once, there was no empty desk beside him. A curious girl named May leaned over and asked, "Do you still feel strong without the sword?" Baka thought for a moment. "I think strength isn't what you carry. It's what you choose to do." During math, he solved a problem even the top student had struggled with. In science, he carefully built a model windmill that actually turned. When a shy boy dropped his lunch tray in the cafeteria, Baka helped him clean up and gave him half of his rice. The sword, wrapped in cloth, sat quietly on a wooden stand inside his room. It hadn't moved, but somehow, it looked peaceful. That night, Baka wrote in his notebook, "Today, I was just me. No sword, no fear, and still, I was enough." It was his first day without the sword, but not his last. From then on, Baka carried it only when needed, because now, the world was starting to see what he had always hoped. Baka was more than his blade. It was a cool morning in the city, and Baka walked the path to school with a fresh notebook under his arm and no sword on his back. He didn't need it today. His heart was calm, and the streets were safe. Or so he thought. As he passed the market, he heard a sharp cry. "Help! My bag!" an old woman shouted, stumbling to the ground. A man in a tattered coat was sprinting away, clutching her small purse. People gasped, but no one moved. Baka did. He took off after the thief, bare feet slapping the stone street. The man weaved through carts and crates, hoping to lose him, but Baka was faster. Years of climbing hills and chasing wild goats in the village had made him swift and steady. When the thief ducked into an alley, Baka followed. "Leave me alone, kid." The thief growled, pulling out a broken glass bottle. Baka didn't flinch. He raised his hand slowly. "I don't want to fight," he said calmly. "But you can't hurt people to survive. You're better than this." The thief lunged. Baka moved fast. He sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it just enough to make him drop the bottle, and swept his legs gently but firmly. The thief hit the ground with a grunt. No sword, no magic, just balance, speed, and control. Moments later, the city guards arrived, and the old woman was helped to her feet. "My hero," she said, hugging Baka tightly. "And you didn't even need that fancy sword." Baka just smiled. Some things are better solved with hands and words. That evening, the story spread through the neighborhood. Baka stopped a thief with nothing but courage and compassion. And for the first time, people didn't say the boy with the sword. They said, the boy with the brave heart. The final term exams were over. Students filled the courtyard, whispering guesses and comparing answers. Some were confident, others were nervous. Baka sat quietly under the shade of a tree, fingers interlocked, eyes on the clouds. He had studied harder than ever before, not to prove anything, but because he wanted to learn. Still, doubt crept in. He was, after all, the boy from the village with no fancy tutors or polished city manners. Then came the announcement. The headmaster walked out with a thick list in hand. Top student this term, he paused, squinting at the paper, is Baka. For a heartbeat, the courtyard fell silent. Then Bakan, he did it. The swordless wonder. Baka's a genius. A loud cheer exploded across the school grounds. The same kids who once avoided him now clapped, shouted, and ran to pat his back. Some even hoisted him up on their shoulders. Baka's face flushed with surprise, then joy. He couldn't help but laugh. But how? One student asked. You used to be behind in every subject. Baka smiled humbly. I kept trying. I asked questions. I stayed late to study. I failed sometimes, but I never gave up. The teachers nodded proudly. Even the headmaster cracked a rare smile. He didn't just get the highest marks, he said. He helped others along the way. That's what makes a true scholar. That night, Baka sat by his window, listening to the city breathe. The sword rested quietly in the corner, untouched. His report card lay on the table, but what stayed in his heart wasn't the score. It was the laughter of the children, the pride in his teacher's eyes, and the feeling that, at last, he belonged. The celebrations didn't last long. One gray morning, a rider from the mountains came to the city, soaked in rain and sorrow. He brought terrible news. Master Riku, Baka's old sword teacher, was dead, murdered. Baka stood in silence as the messenger spoke. The wind carried the weight of grief through the school courtyard. He was found outside the village gate, the rider said. No signs of a fight, just gone. Baka didn't speak to anyone that evening. He packed a small bag, picked up his sword, the one he hadn't touched in weeks, and headed home to the village. When he arrived, the sky was dark with storm clouds. The village looked the same, but colder somehow. Doors stayed shut, eyes peeked through cracks. Baka stood in the center of the square, sword on his back, cloak heavy with rain. Who killed my master? He asked, voice steady, but burning underneath. No one answered. He protected this village, taught me peace, not vengeance. Who betrayed him? Still silence. Then an old man stepped forward, one of the village elders. His hands trembled. Not all believed Master Riku belonged here, he said. Some feared his past, feared the sword he once carried. Baka's fists clenched. Fear is not a reason to kill. No, the elder said quietly, but it's enough for someone weak to listen to the wrong whisper. A clue emerged, strange boot prints near the edge of the forest. Not from the village. Someone outside had come through unnoticed, and Master Riku had met them alone. Baka swore quietly. He would find the truth. But he wouldn't let rage guide him, only justice. Before he left again, he bowed before his master's grave, eyes closed, sword resting before the stone. You taught me to be more than a weapon. Now I'll use what you gave me, not to take life, but to protect it. And so began a new chapter for Baka, not a student. Not just a hero, but a seeker of truth. Baka was still investigating Master Riku's death when whispers began to spread. Miners near the cliffs had found something strange, rare metals deep in the stone, glowing faintly under moonlight. A mix of silver and something older, something not yet named. The elders called it heart silver, a metal said to react to human spirit. And where there is wealth, trouble follows. Days later, a group of black cars rolled into the village. Shiny, silent, threatening. From the lead car stepped a tall man in a dark coat, his smile sharp like a knife. His name was Goro, head of a powerful city mafia known as the Iron Vultures. This peaceful little village, Goro said, sits on treasure. I offer protection, roads, money, opportunity. The villagers stayed quiet. "I don't take no kindly," he added, flashing a cold grin. "Think wisely." Baka stepped out from the crowd, cloak fluttering, sword resting on his back once more. "We don't need your protection," he said. "We protect each other." Goro raised an eyebrow. "Ah, the famous boy with a sword and no master. I've heard of you." His guards reached for their weapons. Baka didn't move. "You'll find this village has more spirit than you expect." That night, a barn was set on fire. 2 families were threatened. Baka spent the night walking the village border, sword in hand, watching for shadows. He didn't sleep. The next morning, Goro returned with 20 men. "This is your last chance," he said. Baka stepped forward, but not alone. The blacksmith, the teacher, the farmers, even the children stood behind him. Some carried sticks, others tools. None had swords, but they stood. "This land belongs to the people who work it," Baka said. "You want to dig? You'll have to go through all of us." The standoff was tense, but something in Goro's eyes flickered doubt. Baka wasn't just one boy anymore. He was a symbol. And Goro knew. Fighting them meant losing more than a battle. It meant starting a war his empire couldn't afford. He left for now. But Baka knew the mafia would return. Stronger. Smarter. So he made a vow. "If you come for this village again, I won't fight alone. I'll raise an army of protectors, not to conquer, but to defend what matters." Though the village seemed calm, Baka knew. This silence was just the beginning of a storm. One night, 2 boys who had been digging near the hills came running back, pale with fear. "We saw something glowing down there," one of them whispered. "It looked like diamonds." Baka's heart skipped a beat. Diamonds. The land, once known for its soil and rare metals, was now the target of a far more dangerous desire. And as soon as the rumor spread, Goro returned. This time, he brought more than words. Heavy machines, corrupt officials, fake documents, armed men. "I own this land now," Goro declared with a smug smile. "Even the government agrees." Baka stepped forward, calm but firm. "You don't want just the land," he said. "You want to consume everything. Our forests, our homes, our spirit." Goro's smile widened. "And no one can stop me." But Baka was ready. He gathered the villagers. Some kept watch in the forest. Others dug into the paperwork Goro had forged. Even the school children helped, drawing maps, tracking movements, learning to resist. Baka himself ventured deep into the hills, exploring the caves beneath. What he found shocked him. The diamonds weren't just riches. They were tied to something ancient, a force sleeping beneath the land. A sacred power his master had once warned him about. And now Goro wanted to rip it from the earth with machines and greed. Back in the village square, Baka stood tall and spoke. "Goro thinks these diamonds give him power. But true power lives in the soil beneath our feet, in the people who love it. If we stand together, no one can take this land from us." Goro began to make his move. His men started fencing the land, intimidating families. But Baka wasn't just a boy anymore. He had become the guardian of the land. Goro didn't wait any longer. Days after his declaration, armed men stormed the village. They forced families out of their homes, herded them like cattle, and chained the strongest to machines and mine shafts. The village had become a labor camp. Elders were silenced. Children were separated from parents. Even school was turned into a command center. Those who resisted vanished. Baka fought, but he was outnumbered. He tried to rally others, but fear spread faster than courage. He was caught and beaten, left at the edge of the hills as a warning. But Goro didn't stay to watch the ruin. He had other empires to manage. He boarded his black helicopter and flew away, back to his unnamed homeland, a shadowy place whispered about only in rumors. "This village is just one mine," he had said. "I own 20 more in 10 different countries." I don't care who lives here. I only care what's under it. But Baka wasn't broken. As he lay bruised and bleeding, villagers secretly came to him at night. They brought herbs, food, and quiet words of loyalty. A young girl, barely 12, whispered, "They took my father. You're the only one who ever fought back. Teach us." And Baka realized they hadn't lost hope. They were waiting for a spark, for him. So he rose again, this time not with a sword, but with a plan. He would not only fight back, he would lead a rebellion, one that would burn through the mines, and perhaps, one day, reach even Goro's unknown empire. The air in the mines had grown thicker, with dust, with pain, and with something else, rebellion. Baka had planned everything. They had a stolen map, 3 smuggled lockpicks, 1 broken ventilation shaft that led out toward the river, and just 2 hours of night when the guards changed shift. He whispered the plan to trusted villagers, the blacksmith, the teacher, a few teens, even the kids. Everyone had a role. "No mistakes," Baka said. "We all go, or none of us do." The night came. Hearts pounded louder than footsteps. The shaft was tighter than they'd hoped, but people began slipping through. Then, a shout. One child slipped and knocked over a rusted pipe. The clatter echoed like thunder. The alarm rang. Spotlights flashed. Dogs barked. Guns raised. Baka grabbed the last child and pushed him into the shaft, but he stayed behind to slow the guards. He fought, bare hands, bleeding knuckles, until they overwhelmed him. Morning, the villagers were dragged back, bruised and defeated. Baka, chained and beaten, was thrown to the center of the camp. "You thought you were smart," the head overseer growled. "You'll rot here forever." But Baka wasn't broken, because something had changed. During the escape, the teacher had found an old ledger in the overseer's office, a shipping log. It listed mining sites, contacts, and one name under the section marked Owner, Goro, Country Unknown. But another line stood out. Next inspection, Port Yuzaka, 14 days. A clue, a lead. Goro wasn't just a ghost in the shadows. He was moving, and Baka knew what that meant. "I have to leave this place. I have to find Goro, and end this, not just for this village, but for every village like it." The escape had failed, but the mission had just begun. Baka's body was bruised, but his resolve had never been stronger. The villagers knew he was their only chance to stop Goro, not just here, but everywhere. So this time they planned together. They caused distractions. A fire at the edge of the mining camp, flooded one of the tunnels, faked illness to confuse the guards. During that chaos, Baka slipped into the shadows, free at last. For 3 days, he moved through forests, old trails, and dry riverbeds, dodging patrols, until the skyline of the city finally rose before him. He was exhausted, dirty, and alone, but not forgotten. He remembered something, his school days. Before the mines, before Goro, back when he wore a uniform and not shackles, he had friends. One of them was Raihan, the son of a wealthy businessman. They hadn't spoken in years, but Baka had no one else. He stood outside Raihan's apartment gate, guards looking at him with suspicion. "I need to see him," Baka said, voice firm. Raihan came out a moment later, dressed sharp, clean, surprised to see the wild-haired boy at his doorstep. "Baka," he said, "what happened to you?" Baka looked him in the eyes. "Slavery, mines, Goro, and I need your help to go abroad. I have to find him and stop him." Raihan stared for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "Come in. Tell me everything." Now, in the heart of the city, Baka has a real chance. With Raihan's money and connections, he might just reach Port Yuzaka, the last known destination in Goro's secret global network. But time is running out. Goro doesn't leave loose ends for long. After a long shower, clean clothes, and a full meal. The first in weeks, Baka finally felt human again. But his mind stayed sharp. Every second counted. Raihan took him to a high-rise office on the 32nd floor. The place smelled like leather and coffee. Walls were lined with awards and photos of handshakes with foreign leaders. Behind a large desk sat Mr. Karim, Raihan's father, a man with power, connections, and a network that spanned across countries. "This is the boy you told me about?" he asked. "Yes, father," Raihan said. "His name is Baka, and he needs to go abroad. Fast." Baka stood straight, despite the weight of scars and exhaustion. "I'm not here for money," he said. "I'm here for justice. There's a man named Goro. He enslaved my village. He's building an empire of mines across the world. I found proof he's headed to Port Izaka. I need to go after him." Mr. Karim stared at him, unreadable. Then he stood, walked to a cabinet, and opened a drawer full of foreign documents. "You're either very brave or very stupid," he said quietly. "But you remind me of someone I once knew, a soldier who fought the impossible." He pulled out a folder. "Let's prepare your passport. You'll need a new identity and a reason for entering the country." For the next few days, Baka was trained how to answer questions at airports, what not to say to customs officers, how to move without drawing attention. Raihan arranged new clothes, flight tickets, and even a small encrypted phone with a tracking signal. "You're not going in alone," he said. "I'll be your contact from here." The passport was fake, but flawless. Name: Arun Sen. Nationality: tourist destination, Port Izaka, coastal region. Baka stared at it in silence. "It's just paper," Mr. Karim said. "But it's a weapon if you know how to use it." And with that, Baka boarded a plane for the first time in his life. No sword, no map, just fire in his heart, and the name Goro burned into his soul. The plane landed with a hiss on the wet tarmac. Rain fell like it always did in Port Izaka, fast, heavy, and full of secrets. Baka stepped out, his new passport clutched in his jacket, eyes scanning the new land. The air smelled of salt, sweat, and diesel. A port city filled with factories, container yards, and people who didn't ask questions. He had no sword, no village, and no safety. But he wasn't alone. From an old journal his master left behind, Baka had found a name written in faded ink. Kenzo. Yuzaka Kenzo was an old friend of Baka's master, a man who once fought in silent wars before disappearing into the city's underworld. If anyone could help him find Goro here, it was him. With only a rough address and a few local phrases, Baka found himself walking through rusted alleys and neon-lit markets. He arrived at a small, forgotten dojo. Walls cracked, sign faded. Inside, an old man was sweeping the floor with quiet precision. He looked up, his eyes locked with Baka's. There was silence, and then recognition. "You look like him," the man said slowly. "Your master, he taught me how to survive." "Who are you?" "I'm his student," Baka replied. "He's dead. Goro killed him. And now Goro is here, hiding behind businessmen and corruption. I need to find him." Kenzo dropped his broom. His face darkened. "Then you've come to the right ghost." That night, Kenzo fed Baka and showed him an old map of the port, routes, warehouses, shipping records. "Goro operates through shell companies," he said. "He uses cargo ships to move equipment, workers, and sometimes worse." Kenzo pointed to one pier, marked in red ink. "This is where his shipments leave next week. If he's still in Port Izaka, he'll be there." Baka looked at the docks on the map. His hands clenched. "Then that's where I go." The training days turned to weeks. The rain didn't stop in Port Izaka, but inside the broken dojo, something powerful was taking shape. Baka was training. Kenzo, though old, moved like a shadow. He didn't speak much, but when he did, every word cut deeper than a blade. "You have anger," he told Baka one morning. good, but anger without control is just noise. Training began at sunrise. Swordsmanship. Kenzo brought out a pair of wooden practice blades. He moved with elegance. Baka swung with fury. Too wild, Kenzo would say, and knock him down again. And again, until Baka learned not to strike but to wait. Martial arts, grappling, dodging, footwork. Kenzo taught him how to fight 5 men at once, and disappear between the 6th and 7th. Gun training. In a locked room under the dojo, Kenzo opened a trunk. Inside were pistols, rifles, and ammunition. Baka hesitated. "I've never used these." Kenzo handed him a pistol. "You will. Goro doesn't fight with honor." Every night after training, they studied maps, photos, shipping lists. Kenzo showed him how to spot a fake business, trace a shell company, and follow the scent of corruption. One night, as they sat under a flickering bulb, Kenzo asked, "Why do you still fight, Baka?" And Baka said, "Because no one else will. Because the world forgot my village, but I didn't." Kenzo didn't respond, but the next day he gave Baka something wrapped in cloth. A sword. Not ancient, not magical, just strong, balanced, and deadly. "Yours now," he said. "Use it to protect, not to prove." Baka looked at himself in the cracked mirror. The boy who once walked into the city for school was gone. In his place stood a fighter, forged in pain, sharpened by purpose. And Goro would soon know it. The training was brutal. Bruises layered over old scars. Blisters split open daily. But Baka never stopped. Every punch, every kick, every swing of the sword wasn't just practice. It was a promise. A promise to his village. A promise to his fallen master. A promise to himself. Then came the breakthrough. Kenzo returned one night with intel. He bribed a dock worker and got access to a sealed cargo log. One entry stood out. Private vessel, midnight, dock 17 cargo. Classified client, Goro Corporation. Kenzo looked at Baka. This is it. He's coming. Baka geared up. All black clothes, a concealed pistol, and his new sword tied across his back beneath his coat. That night, he slipped into the shipping yard with Kenzo's help. The fog rolled in thick, muffling footsteps and hiding shadows. At Dock 17, sleek cars lined up beside a massive ship. Armed guards stood by. Then Goro stepped out, wearing a silver suit, sunglasses at night, and that same cruel smile Baka remembered from the mine. Baka's blood froze for a moment. Then it boiled. He struck fast. A flash of steel. 2 guards down before they could raise their weapons. A third pulled a gun. Baka disarmed him with a spin kick and slammed him into a crate. Panic erupted. Sirens rang. "Who is that?" Goro roared, turning toward the fight. Baka stepped from the smoke. Face clear, eyes locked. Goro's smile vanished. "You," he whispered. "Baka." For a second, the world stood still. Then Goro shouted, "Kill him," and ran. Baka fought through the remaining guards. Fast, precise, relentless. But by the time he reached the ship, Goro was gone. A speedboat tore away into the darkness. Victory? Not quite. But Goro knew now. Baka was alive, trained, and coming for him. And for the first time, Goro looked afraid.